And so the only thing that is ever happening is that we are coming to recognize the divine nature. We're coming to remember the divinity that we are. And when we speak of divinity, what we're speaking of really is the pure, untainted, immaculate wholeness that we are in truth, and that we have never been divided. And there is this impulse within that dances as a longing, which is the call. When we can really come into connection with the longing, we recognize that the longing itself, the felt sense of the longing in its simplicity, is the call to the divine. It's the innocent call to grace, right? And so this innocent call to grace, to come to the longing, this willingness to come to the being and rest here, is the call, inviting grace to come. The beauty of it is that the longing is born out of that which already knows, out of that which is already complete. And yet, due to concealment, we don't realize that the longing itself is the natural momentum, in a way, of call and response, right? It's like the call is here, the response is here. And what we can be utterly sure of is that when our call is sincere, when our call is untainted and pure of heart, when our surrender is true, that the response is certain, right? This is the beauty. We don't have to wonder, wilt thou come, wilt thou come? Thou will come if the call is sincere. Because the call, it is already responded to, it is already fulfilled in the truth, in wholeness, in utter wholeness. That free of time and space, in the ever-present now, the wholeness is already whole. It's already done. It's already certain, right? So we don't need to waste any time wondering, am I worthy? Will I get there? Is this going to happen for me? Because no, it's not going to happen for me. And yet it is absolutely certain that you will come to know your divine nature by some way, by some means. And that means will be grace. That means will be grace. Because the only means to know the divine nature, to remember, is by grace. And so we have to call upon grace. We have to invite grace in, right? And we invite grace in by being one with the longing, by being in constant surrender, by being the simple presence, the simple innocent presence. These are all means of calling upon grace. And when the call for grace is true and pure of heart, the response will come. There is no question. There is no question. And we will also be, by grace, be given the opportunity to refine and surrender so that our call is pure, right? We will be given every opportunity to refine the call. Because the depth of surrender and the purity of the call has to be absolute, wholehearted. It's not a half measure, bargaining kind of thing with the divine, right? When you are ready to know the divine truth, and really, it doesn't matter what words we use, this is all that is ever happening. Now, we are free to be free, and we are free to be bound. And so we are free to surrender, free to follow the longing, to send out the call. And we are also free to remain bound in the delusion of the mind. Because there's a mechanism here that has been set up. And that is that there has to be a surrender. There has to be a deep willingness to surrender out of the known, out of the condition, out of the protection, and surrender to the divine, to the unknown, to the grace. So we cannot call from a place of ego and expect the call to be answered. We cannot call from a place of wanting or desire for the me and expect that the call will be answered. How could the divine fulfill her purpose if she gave grace to that which is not entirely one-pointed and clear, right? So in a way, we go through these phases in the unfolding where there's a sense of a seeker. And seeks in the exile is constantly disappointed, although has a little bit of fun and some experiences along the way. But we are refining the seeker back, honing the seeker in the external back to the remembering of the purity of longing. Because when we come to remember the purity of longing, we are in the openness, in the presence, and in the presence and openness of the felt sense of the simple longing, we are open to grace. Let's say there's enough spaciousness, enough openness, emptiness. If we want for the divine to come, the grace to come, we have to remain empty. We have to keep the temple empty. We have to keep the heart pure. We have to keep the longing pure. The momentum of the divine is to fill every vacancy, every pure vacancy. And so what the mind says is, there's nothing here, this is boring, nothing. That is the divine vacancy. That is the vacancy, and a depth of vacancy that the divine grace can recognize. Has to be resonating at a certain frequency for grace to come. Really, the divine is the fine, fine frequency, the light, the divine light. So, as we seem to make a journey from personhood and the belief in separation to remember the divinity. It is about this constant surrender, a constant recognition of the longing of the heart, and a constant surrender to keep the gaze fixed and to surrender really to thy will be done. And there are different ways that surrender is being invited. Surrender is being invited through the acceptance of life just as it is. Surrender is being invited by not playing the victim, recognizing that if there is only one, then everything must be the one. And even if that is not understood, cognized, recognized, it is to know that it will never be understood by the mind. And yet there is a spark of faith within. And this is where we rely upon this faith within, which is really the divine spark, that which already knows. And where we recognize this divine spark, that which already knows, we use this faith to support a natural surrender of everything to the divine, without knowing what that means, without knowing how. That we find a way within the inner world to just keep handing it over. Thy will be done. This is all you. Nothing belongs to me. Everything is yours. I am not here to feed my desire. I am here as a vehicle of you, right? It's this constant surrender. I am yours. Take me. There's nothing that I want that is not thy will. I want nothing for myself that is not your grace. We open to this possibility of feeling this depth of surrender when all that is truly longed for is to know the truth. A part of the maturing is this recognition that there is nothing here for the me. This is not an awakening for the me. Now, the collective is still very much in the delusion that awakening is for me, and is still moving very much in the way of imagining that this can be somehow owned and shared from a place of personality, right? But that will never have a true alive frequency. What this is really all about is a depth of surrender, a coming to remember the immaculate, true essence nature that is the nature of all, the all-encompassing one. And we can call that the divine wholeness. We can call that God. We can call that Mother, Ma, the Lord. Many names, right, that we can speak of, but the words don't matter. Nothing matters. Nothing matters. There are too many words, too many books full of words. What a waste of time, right? Because where the mind imagines that it can learn something else and it can purchase another volume, it is just a distraction away from essentially following the call and trusting in absolute surrender that the response will come. In a way, the response is here. The response is life. That we can bring the guidance of coming to the being, recognizing the stillness, recognizing the silence, recognizing the presence, coming to the presence, witnessing consciousness. And all of this is inviting a stilling, a quietening, where the remembering can happen. But without surrender and the invitation of grace to come, there will be a sense of a me that is doing something, a me that believes that they can follow some kind of technique and get somewhere. But it's not so. And that is why we speak about the resonance as the only truth. That when we come to stillness, when we come to the silence of being, it's where we can feel the resonance that brings a recognition. And the recognition is a remembering of the true essence nature. It is opening to a finer frequency than the mind consciousness and the body consciousness, so that we come to recognize what I am is this finer frequency of being, that I am not the mind, I am not the body, and I am not bound by the limited patterns of consciousness of the mind-body. And the recognition is in the resonance. It's in the remembrance. It's in the direct experience. And direct experience is essentially a vibration, a resonance. It's not an experience that the me or the person or the mind is having. Direct experience is here now, timeless. And direct experience of being is always here now, timeless. It doesn't come and go. It has never come and gone. And so as we come to the stillness, to the presence, and the recognition of that which is always here underneath the moving, changing landscape of experience, we start to open to the vastness. We start to open to a felt sense of an expansion out of the sense of limitation. We come to a sense of the stillness, the presence, the silence, the openness of simply being. And we can directly recognize that this being, this silent, still being, is always here, underneath the moving, changing. There's a direct and immediate recognition. It is when the attention of awareness rests, relaxes, falls away from identification with things and just rests. And the sense of expansion, of the openness, it's really the recognition of what is always here. And the depth of presence, the depth of still, silent presence that is recognized is according to the depth of the ability to let go, to stop doing and be in the allowing of natural surrender. Cannot do surrender, cannot force surrender. In a way, surrender is like a drop of grace in the presence of being, the letting go of grasping, the letting go of wanting, and truly being here. The surrender starts. There's no one letting go of anything. It's just being the aware being that is just simply here. So there are ways that we can point to this, and we point many ways in order for there to be a stirring of remembrance. The deeper the remembrance, the recognition that this is always here and never goes anywhere, that it is always the same. And then the recognition that to come to the stillness, to the silence, to be the aware being is like a sanctuary. It's the holy, right? And here we are available to grace. This is the call to feel the longing, to be here. To be here wholly. To be here wholeheartedly. To be here without a thread that's wanting something else. To be here willing to let go of everything. To be taken. And so the grace of the play of life is that it is constantly inviting surrender. It is constantly inviting us to see where we are bound, where we are attached, where we are not fully pure in our call, right? And so there is a grace of being able to be aware so that we can bring an illumined presence and unhook the places that are like obscurations and holdings. It is even just interesting to be aware that as these words come that speak of this willingness to just let go of everything, to not hold on to a single thing, to want the divine more than anything, a willingness to let it all go, to see that nothing means anything, like to feel within, what does it feel like to conjure that up? To really, within your inner experience, to feel a sense of being absolutely one-pointed, and to have this honesty, to be able to say, oh, I guess I don't really want it as much as I thought I did, right? Because the thinking you want it is very, very different to being completely available for grace. It's just good information, right? The truth is that when this is truly longed for, the grace is here. It's not being withheld. everything is offering us the possibility to see through our conditionings and our protections that essentially keep us protected from what we are truly longing for, right? That keep us bound in a story of unworthiness, unlovableness, not ready. Whatever it is, that those are our protections from grace, right? So it's not that there is psychological work, or it's definitely not about using the mind and the mental faculty to see this, but it's to recognize and to illuminate, to recognize that if you're giving with one hand and you're taking it back away with another hand, then grace will not come. Right? It has to be given with both hands, without a taking back. And so it's this recognition of the ways that we give and we take back, where we offer anything and then we collaborate with something, right? That collaborate with something that enforces separation. And within this mechanism, there's no room for guilt and shame, because that is just another strategy of the mind. Because the divine is not here with a conditional invitation. Grace is not with any conditions. It's just that grace cannot find you if you are not turning towards grace wholeheartedly, right? If you're not resonating, you cannot really be found. Now, of course, on a certain level, everything is the one, but this is what is wanting to come forward right now. Because it doesn't matter if we think we have a conceptual or intellectual understanding of what oneness is. What grace is inviting is that we actually recognize what it takes to be available for grace. And once we recognize, we can have an openness to illuminate the places within us that are holding back. And just the ability to see clearly, to illuminate, to have an honesty. Yeah, being invited to stop denying the truth of who we are, to stop pretending, and to come to the depth of presence and openness. Recognize that we are being refined, we are being worked by grace. So on a certain level, grace is always here. Life is grace. Everything is grace. But to be carried to the finer and finer frequencies, there has to be a surrender. There has to be a recognition of the true longing in its purity. It's as if we have to put, as this expression says, you have to put your money where your mouth is, right? You can't just be spieling about this is all that's wanted, right? And then be disappointed. And this is where it's an invitation for such an honesty, because that kind of honesty humbles us within our internal experience. No one is marking your book. No one is watching you. You are in your own unfolding. And let's say your duty, as is the duty of every being, and the same here, the responsibility is only for the absolute purity of your sincerity, let's say, right? To be responsible for the absolute purity of your sincerity. Because this is not being imposed upon anyone. It's a natural impulse in consciousness to follow the evolutionary spark to know itself. It's natural. And yet there is this place that seems like a choice. And of course, it's all according to the consciousness. But where we feel like we have a choice, what do we choose? And it's to have an awareness of what we choose when there feels like a choice. Do we choose the divine? Do we choose the truth? Do we choose the presence? Or do we choose, oh, a little bit of this won't hurt, a little bit of that, right? But that is what is taking away from the one-pointedness. And it's just worth knowing, it's worth recognizing that no one is watching you, and yet it affects the resonance, it affects the frequency of your call. At every moment, be drenched with surrender. At every moment, be pointed towards that longing. Let everything be for that. You see, it doesn't mean that life doesn't go on in the same way, but let every moment be interacting with the divine, for the divine, feeding the divine, right? The recognition that you are an instrument, right? We could say maybe we move from being like, feeling like being a servant of the divine, an instrument of the divine. You are already, whether you think about it in that way or whether it feels true, because it's all there is. That we're being moved, we're being played, it's all a divine orchestration. And once we come to recognize this and we surrender my will to thy will, surrender control, and we just allow whatever is happening, and we catch the places of resistance, we catch the habits and protections as they come up, and recognize that it is grace indeed that these are even arising to be seen through, and that we have the capacity to witness and illuminate and not be bound. What incredible grace it is to not be completely veiled, and that we have this incredible possibility of seeing through all that keeps us bound. that we have this incredible possibility to be here, so present, that consciousness is evolved enough that we can be here so present, here, in the silence, in the stillness, as the being. That we even have any sense that it is possible. That we can feel that spark in the longing, that the call is somehow being responded to. And we don't have any governance over how that looks. It is this constant surrender, that everything is by thy grace. And it's about seeing it with clarity, that nothing is out of place. Can sometimes feel things are not the way I want them to be. I want them to be like this. And really, it's an invitation not to try to aspire to things being the way you want, but letting go and realizing that the way that things are just the way that things are. And it's about letting go of the resistance that is in the wanting for things to be different, right? Thy will, thy will. Oh, okay, if it's like this, this must be the divine orchestration. This has to be the one. How could it be any other way? Check. Could it be any other way than the way that it is if you don't overlay a thought? No, right? This is where in direct experience we can check. We can check and discover that things can only be the way they are. How is this moment without thought? How is this moment without wanting anything other than this? And this incredible grace where we illuminate. In a way, part of our evolution out of personhood is out of victimhood, out of the sense of being a victim to life, out of the sense of being powerless, out of the sense of hoping and dreaming and wishing and wanting, to recognize that we are completely responsible for everything that happens, whatever it is. And not responsible in a way that the mind might imagine, but that consciousness is moving in the way that it does, because it's the only way that it can move according to the patterning, right? And that really everything that arises, everything that happens is happening for our freedom. And we have to come to a depth of maturity to even be able to hear that without violently contesting that possibility, right? But this is where, in the maturing of consciousness, the unraveling of consciousness, the ripening of consciousness, that the ability to receive a finer resonance and being pulled by the finer resonance, being compelled by the finer resonance, because the longing is so alive, the longing to know yourself, the longing to remember the pure, immaculate, divine wholeness, that the spark inside you is calling, right? In a way, as we come together, we are really here to fan the flames of the longing, bring alive that the call within, this spark within, this longing within, is worth listening to, worth falling into, worth letting this longing call out. I am yours. Take me, show me, guide me, carry me into you, breathe me into you. Bring the remembering of the light. So as we open, we start to be able to subtly perceive in the resonance the light, the truth. In direct experience, we start to, in the innermost being, recognize directly the beingness, and that what we are is indeed consciousness. We recognize the light of consciousness, the light of awareness, where consciousness is conscious of itself. And this is the one light. What gives light to consciousness but the divine light, the light of wholeness. And it is guiding us. Once we can perceive this, once we can even perceive the possibility of this, there is so much grace already flowing, right? And it is to stay wholesome in our call, that grace can keep flowing, and we can start to recognize the bliss of being. We can start to recognize the bliss and take in the delicious nourishment of the bliss of being that supports a greater surrender, a greater submission, and a recognition of holiness. That holiness is the start of feeling the divine frequency, the frequency of light, the frequency of the purity of the wholeness. That there is the ability to access this on some level in all beings, and that where we can access and recognize this divine frequency, let us bow into it, let us fall into it, let us drown in it. Let us be utterly saturated with the gorgeous resonance of the bliss of being and the spark of recognition within our own direct experience that this is possible, that grace is here, that the being is recognized, that the truth is here. And that once we recognize that what we are is consciousness and not a mind body, that we are already in the flow of being taken, right? And once we are already in the flow of being taken, it is really just to enjoy the ride, right? Float on your back like an otter, right? Just jump and dance like a little fish or a big whale, right? Just sneak around like a seal. Just move in the flow. Just move in the flow. Just move in the flow. Don't resist anything. Just flow with the flow of life. And be carried into the deeper clarity. It's as if, you know, once you perceive the light, once you perceive the consciousness, it's all just happening. And it's about keeping aligned so that the light can get lighter, brighter in your direct experience, right? Clearing the obscurations, clearing the patterns of limitation, so that the call can continue like a clear bell, and that we are offered this grace of refinement of our call. We're offered this grace to realign, to just check that we're pointed. Compass is pointed to truth. Realign. Oh, point the compass to truth. Let everything be pointed to truth. Let everything be pointed to the divine. Right. Let the surrender be practiced in the small things in life, so that when the big things in life come, that we are ready, that we are ready. So as these words come, just being here in the stillness, in the silence of being, the openness, the sense of the vast expansiveness, the infinite unbounded, being here as the timeless moment, unlimited and free, and resonating in recognition. Nothing more delicious than resonating in recognition. Recognizing in direct experience the truth as it is alive, and feeling that directly and confirming it in the innermost being, in the wide open heart, and receiving this invitation to widen, to illuminate. And so there can be this honesty where humbling can happen. The humbling away of the protections, humbling away of the conditions and the habits and the preferences and the learned knowledge and recognition that you do not need anything. Come empty. Come empty. Keep the temple empty and clean and clear and pure. And let the invitation sing out in the silent resonance of your absolute presence and your absolute sincerity. And you will not be disappointed by what is possible. You already are. And the invitation of the timeless moment is to remember what you are and rest here as the timeless moment, as the living, embodied truth in this moment, to feel the power of being yourself, where you are not relying upon the external to validate or confirm, that you come to the true power of being yourself and see through all of the ways that collaboration with separation is a constant giving away of power. And when we give power away, we are turning away from grace. We are turning away from what we are longing for. And so the invitation is to be aware so that you do not turn away and that you can take complete responsibility for your sincerity. That it's not a pointing of this isn't working for me. This isn't working. Right? I need another book, another teacher, another this, another that. As long as there is a giving away of a sense of responsibility for your own depth of sincerity, you will always be seeking for another this, another that, imagining that someone else will give you something and having some moments of pleasure in the experience of seemingly, according to the ego, getting what you want. But this is not about the ego getting what it wants. It's about recognizing who you are underneath the play of egocentric patterning and behaviors, and opening and opening and opening into the divine grace that is yours, that is you. Opening into the remembering of the divine wholeness, the perfection, the beauty, the immaculate purity of the untainted one that is and that you are. So we shift from being like a servant in submission to being an instrument, a vessel, to remembering the oneness. In a way, it's like remembering being a child of the divine. But in the recognition of being a child of the divine, there's a deeper recognition of the absolute oneness with, right? Being a child of keeps us humble, keeps us begging, and at the same time, the depth of remembering of the oneness with brings a seamless flow of knowing there is only one and one grace, and the absolute belonging to divine wholeness. It's discovered in essence. It's discovered in the fine frequency, in the being. We open to all that is possible in consciousness, as consciousness, being consciously awake and aware as the simple silent being. We open to all that is possible in the field of infinite possibilities, where the flow of consciousness refining and remembering itself is shifting and culturing and refining all of the systems on every level multidimensionally, allowing for there to be a greater embodiment of the divine, right? For the divine to take up resonance, that we are purifying and honing and culturing all of the systems for this remembering to not be abstract, but to be an integrated, lived wholeness beyond what can be imagined. That we are the living evolutionary process of consciousness remembering its finer and finer frequencies. We are the living process of this happening in the field of intelligence right now. They are being honed and tuned. The systems are being reorganized and recalibrated. There is illumination happening on every level. And it is this constant invitation to bring the divine into every cell, every atom, every breath, every action, every step, everything that you know as your life, to invite the divine to be known, to be seen in all of it. Right. To receive the grace. To receive the grace of all that is. It is really like a perspective shift from the me wanting this, wanting that, doing this, doing that, to this surrender to thy will be done. Well, this is how life is moving right now, feeding the divine with every delicious morsel, right? That there is nothing of the life that is not a deep and profound bowing to the divine, a deep and profound service of the divine. So as these words come, to feel the resonance, feel the enlivened remembering in your direct experience, the stillness, the silence, the deep peace of simply being, the timeless being here now, open, infinite, free of time and space, free of bounds. See the divine in everything. Recognize yourself, the shining light in everything. Address everything with the subtlety and grace of divine recognition. It doesn't mean that the life changes. It's just seeing that the life is divine. One life living itself, flowing in the vastness, flowing in harmony, ever illuminating itself moving through the heat of tapas, let's say, moving through the heat of refinement, surrender, in order for a greater remembering of the great shining radiant light that is the heart of all. Opening, flowing, clearing, purifying, and enjoying. We are here to enjoy, to be life, enjoying life, right? There is so much joy as life lives itself. Delight, wonder, awe. To come to the remembering that everything is divine. It keeps us in a constant sense of wonder and awe. Wow. Yeah. That teacup, it's divine, right? Everything is divine. That ache, that pain, that twitch, that storyline, all of it, right? It's a divine orchestration. That meal you're preparing, divine. That body you're feeding, divine. To be in this constant sense of awe and wonder. To not know how it is possible, and yet to feel the resonance of that which somehow recognizes. In the sense of being, there is a knowing that knows. And as the subtle perception of the intelligence of consciousness opens more and more to itself, the sense of awe and wonder, the sense of holiness is perceived in the light. The beauty is perceived in the peace, in the openness. Just resting. That the attention naturally drops away from things when consciousness hears itself. When consciousness hears itself, it is compelled to rest in itself. And if there is mind activity that is wanting to pull the attention, just to be aware of that and be free to recognize that as awareness, you are not bound or held captive, that as awareness being aware, you are ever free. And here, the confirmation that what you are is not touched by the movement of mind, is not touched by the tensions of the body, that you are a consciousness that is finer and freer than you could ever have imagined in the sense of being bound in mind-body. that you are a consciousness that is profoundly fine, subtle, divine, right? Ever opening, ever growing into, ever remembering, ever surrendering into yourself. Wherever there is a holding, it is just to be with the holding pattern, the sensation, not the story, and allow the sensation to unravel through the body consciousness or through the mind consciousness, wherever the holding is. Just be so present with it. Meet it with loving presence and allow the natural surfacing and unraveling. All a flow of grace. All a flow of grace. And so in the longing, in the presence of being, we are calling, and in the felt sense of the finer frequency, the response is here. You already are. Feel the resonance. Confirm in your innermost being the knowing that knows that you already are. And as you rest here in the knowing that you already are, you are in constant surrender and falling into the divine, falling deeper into the light, into the remembering of wholeness. And as the remembering is here, and there is a finer and finer frequency, falling in and into yourself, falling into the perfection, the wholeness, the purity of the immaculate that is already known. Resting here. Resting in the openness, resting in the presence, the longing, the call. Ever present, night and day, night and day. Ever open, ever open. Carry me into you, resting here, night and day, night and day. timeless presence resting here, ever open, ever open. Mm. Mm. Feel the response, feel the fulfillment, feel the light filling. In a way, it's like a divine descent. The call, the response is like a divine descent, a felt sense of more openness, more light, more spaciousness, more freedom, more clarity. Being filled with remembering, with the light of radiant remembering. Mm. The only thing between you and the divine is your searching in the external. Give up the search and be here, so present. Let the search end. And be here. Be the finding. Be the alive finding, the living answer, the call and the response, the wholeness that is. Mm. 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 The call of grace. Mm. Mm. The love of God. You do not know from which direction is the call, which direction is the response, which direction is the love. Does not matter. It is just the surrender into it. Into the now, into this here, now, present being, remembering. Mm. Mm.